Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Carl Christoph. I'm the General Counsel for the City School District, the City of Rochester. And on behalf of its Board of Education, I would like to welcome you to this 2019 forum on the selection of our next superintendent of schools. I have a few housekeeping announcements to begin with. The restrooms are located outside of this door. If you take a left, and then on the very first corridor, there's a small corridor also to the left, so 2 left turns, and you'll be at the restrooms if that's necessary. In the unlikely event that there is an emergency and we have to evacuate the room, we have exits not only to my left and your right, but also to your left, as well as in the back of the room. So, as I said, in that unlikely event, we have 3 exits from this room. In terms of our format for this morning, each candidate will take about 10 minutes or so to introduce himself, following which we will have questions. There are some of them that have been pre-submitted on a web platform that we set up, but we're also going to be taking questions from the audience. So I hope everyone's had the opportunity to pick up the comment cards that are at the registration table. And if you would get those either to my friend Dr. Cotto or myself, I'll be over on this side, Carlos will be over on that side, and we'll make sure that those questions get to the moderator and get put into the mix. Also, another use for the comment cards, for anyone who doesn't want to answer or ask a particular question, but has a comment that they think would be important for the board to consider, there's a box right out also on the registration table. So as you leave today and you drop those comment cards off, we'll make sure that they get to the attention of the Board of Education. So with that said, our first candidate is here, Dr. Devon Horton. And we are also very happy to have with us our moderator this morning, Casey Jones. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to them.
Thank you. I'm Casey Jones from News 10 NBC. Happy to be here. Happy to see all of you here. Wish there were more, of course, but we're going to hope that more will join us. So we're going to go ahead and get started and let Dr. Devon Horton introduce himself.
Good morning. I'm going to stand up a little bit because I have some things I want to share with you. Sorry. So I want to first say thank you to the board and to the community for having me come back today to talk to you about the opportunity, which I think is one of the greatest opportunities that's offered in this country, to lead a school district like Rochester. The city of Rochester, I don't need to tell you about your town, about your city. You know it's a bunch of resilient, hardworking, blue-collar individuals who really care and passionate about their city. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I was born and raised in Chicago, Illinois. While I went to the school in the South, and I currently am employed in JCPS in Kentucky, I'm a Chicago big city guy. Been there my entire life. Majority of my family lives there. My children were raised there, at least in their earlier years. But I'm definitely a Chicago guy. And I was raised in the Robert Taylor housing projects. Robert Taylor housing projects don't even exist. I can't take my children back to see where I was raised because it was that bad. It was that heavy. My birth certificate, unbelievably, it has my dad's name, which I really didn't meet him until I was about 23, 24, written in pencil. My mom tried to make me feel good. She wrote it in pencil, and she wrote Alfie Adams. His name is Alfred Adams. But I don't hold that against my mom because all of us, my 3 siblings, we were all raised the same way, and none of us had dads in our lives. But what I can tell you is that the greatest equalizer for us was education, and that mom, Patricia Horton, she didn't accept excuses. She made it a priority, and no matter what we were dealing with the drugs and the gangs and the violence in the community where I was raised, it was unacceptable for me and my siblings to live that way. I want to talk about some things that was instilled in me by my mom. I'll talk about this other side, this Miracles Framework, in a second, but these words over here on the side, they mean a lot to me. They're not just words on a page, and it's not just lip service. How did we make it out of the projects? 4 siblings, 3 of us with masters and a doctorate, and 1 doing really well with her children and being a mom. We made it because my mom taught me these values about being collaborative, transformational, and disruptive. She said, you're not going to accept the social norms that served and dealt to you in Chicago. You're going to defy these odds. And when I finished 8th grade, I finished being being valedictorian, thinking I'm hot stuff. And I ended up getting into a military school, prestigious military school, Culver Academy. And when I went away from going from Robert Taylor Housing Projects to this prestigious Borden Military School, it was a struggle early on. Socially, I was fine because I used these 3 core values. These are my core values. I understand collaboration is important in every single decision that you make as a superintendent. Transformational in the work and how I operate and looking at things differently. And sometimes you just have to be disruptive, positively disruptive, to defy the social norms that currently exist. And when I went to the military school, by the time I finished, I did okay academically, I was solid. And then I also transitioned, I was the 3rd highest ranking cadet in the entire regime. That was unheard of in Culver Military Academy for an African-American male to be the 3rd highest ranking cadet. I went back to the school just recently, about a month ago, and I got a chance to take a picture of my name up on the wall. You know, when I was a kid, I thought that was really corny to do that, but I was excited to see, oh, here's my name, and wanted to show everyone that. But then as I finished up that military school, my sister, who happened to be the first graduate from college in my entire family, she had just finished up at Rusk College in Mississippi. And she convinced me that Mississippi was a place to be. Well, I ended up going to Mississippi. I just didn't go to Rusk College. I went to Jackson State. And over the summertime while I was in high school, I used to go back to the school and I would tutor students who I knew who grew up in the same buildings with me, their little siblings. And what really made me go into teaching, one of the key pieces, my 2nd year tutoring in the summertime, it was a young man by the name of Aaron Foster. He was the younger sibling of someone who I had graduated from 8th grade with. And when I was tutoring Aaron, Aaron didn't graduate from 8th grade. I was tutoring Aaron, and Aaron, we were trying to identify some terms, actually a response to a question. Then I asked Aaron, I asked him a simple term. I asked him, what does the word mean? Now, I don't remember what the word was, and he didn't know. So I asked him, I don't know anything about teaching. I said, let's go to the dictionary. So we opened up the dictionary, and Aaron gets to trying to find the word, and he said, Devon, the word is not in a dictionary. I said, Aaron, the word isn't here. Let's use our skills to define so that we can find terms. He started going through, and I realized Aaron was skipping over a letter. So I said, Aaron, what comes after K? And what comes after M? So Aaron, I had to, as a teacher, they tell you, don't teach students to say your alphabet by singing a song. And that's legit because Aaron, he said, you know that part of the song when you're teaching ABC, LMNOP? Aaron was LMNOP. He didn't know. And I'm not making this up. And then on the inside of me, I was touched because I'm like, wow, we just came through the same building. We just came through the same school. How is it that Aaron doesn't know this? So helped him out with that. And when I went into Jackson State, went into elementary education right out the gate. I knew I wanted to be a teacher. I knew I had to go back and make a difference. Did well there, met some great people, met some strong families, and then I ended up coming back to Chicago, where I worked in 3 of the most challenging schools that you will find. My first school for 5 years, it was in a community called Terrortown. The second school was called Inglewood. So if you call us, and that's a nickname. So if the nickname is Terrortown, you can imagine what it's about. So my first year, and I'm gonna move through because I don't want to get yanked off the stage. My first year, I went into the school, took my resume, and it was in the summer after I graduated. And the principal, I should have known something was funny because he happened to be there that day, and he was in shorts and everything. And I gave him my resume, and he said, oh, this is great, you're a certified teacher. I said, yes, sir. You want to interview? I'm like, absolutely. Can you do it today? Sure, what time? Right now. Okay. Go in, interview with him, maybe a 30-minute interview, not that long. Just ask questions about my background, some general stuff. Didn't know much about my teaching ability, but that I was an African-American male with a teaching certification. And so he said, you know what, we're gonna offer you this job. First interview I've ever been on in my life, it defied all of everything that I was told and trained as far as having on a suit, sitting up straight, answering questions. It just went away from that because I wasn't prepared for an interview. Got hired, first day, he says, well, he calls me to his office, we're gonna delay you for your 8th grade class. I was hired to be an 8th grade teacher. And in Chicago, if you recall, if you know this, most of the schools are K through 8. So he said, while the class is not ready, we're gonna put you in a 2nd grade classroom. And he put me in a 2nd grade classroom for my first 3 days. He said for my first 3 days. So I go in, and God bless every single student, every single teacher who has taught 2nd grade, because that is tough. And I'm not saying that lightly, it's tough. I couldn't do it. So I went in, and the students, if you were too aggressive, they would cry. If you were too nice, they would run you over. It got to the point, I thought this was funny. One young lady, she said, you look like, she's in class, she raises her hand, we're doing some work. She said, you look like my daddy. So I look around, I don't even know how to respond to that. And I'm like, oh yeah, great, continue your work. So for the rest of that time, my first year, kids, when they saw me, they would say, Daddy, these are second graders. And I thought that was really funny, like, wow, second grade teachers are important, because how do you control that? So 3 days in, they say, your class is ready. Okay, that's great. Class is ready. I go to my class, and what I've found, they said, well, we have 5 other 8th grade classrooms, and what we allowed them to do, because there was like 33-1, that is ridiculous, we allowed teachers to take students from their class, the other 8th grade classes, and give them to the new guy on the first floor while the other classes on the third. Wow, okay, I'll take them. So they give me these students, and these were students that really, when I looked at their records and their background, these were students that were not doing well in school, had social issues, and they put them all in my class. And so I was on this first floor, and I knew, because I was collaborative, transformational, and disruptive, that I was not going to accept and allow these students to fail. I had a group of teachers that corralled themselves around me and built that efficacy in us so that we can do this work. And for 3 straight years, with that same group of students, same population of students, I should say, we ended up having the second highest performance out of all 8th grade classrooms. The only class that didn't beat us was the gifted class. She didn't give up any of her students. I wonder why. And I then go on to Inglewood, where we did some single-gender classrooms. And at single-gender classrooms, for the first time, it was the first time it was happening in Chicago. It was all in the same building, and I ended up becoming the assistant principal, a teaching AP, after my 3rd year there. And can you imagine what a teaching AP is about and how challenging that is to be an AP, assistant principal, and a teacher at the same time? It was tough. Throughout my tenure as a classroom teacher, 10 years in the classroom, I'm only 9 years removed from being in that classroom. I taught English, math, science, social studies, and my last 2 years, I was PE/assistant principal. So I have a great respect for teachers and a great respect for administration in learning how to make that work. I would then go on to go to Phillips Academy High School, which is one of the most challenging high schools in the city, actually in the state, lowest performing. Never working in high school a day in my life. I was responsible for supporting 11th and 12th grade juniors. And I'm going to use this presentation throughout my discussion when I'm answering questions, so I won't have to push it through. But I was actually moved into the position of supporting 11th and 12th grade. It was a turnaround school. And just that first year, I was told I'm dealing with instruction only. And it was true. The principal held me accountable for supporting instruction. And then after supporting those students and supporting those 11th grade and 12th grade students, we end up having the highest ACT growth of any school in CPS from 1 year to the next. Because we were collaborative, we were transformational, and more importantly, we were disruptive. We were not accepting the social norms of those schools. I operate from these core values in every single thing that I do and how I live. And after serving as 1 year as AP, I ended up transitioning to the principal's role. For the next 3 years, we would take Phillips Academy, a historically underperforming school, level 3, and by the time I left, we were level 1. I couldn't do it alone. I had great teachers, we had strong community involvement, but more importantly, we respected and we valued the students. And we did not accept the social norms that was typical of that school. Sorry. And then I got a chance to go into East St. Louis. Going from East St. Louis is the murder capital of the United States, per capita. Poverty rate over 50%. I'm sorry. Yes, poverty rate over 50%, 100% free and reduced lunch across the board, 99% African American. But I knew going in that I could not do this work without having a structure. So I designed this Miracles framework, and it's more to the framework, but I want to talk to you. Each one of those acronyms we all can read. I don't need to go through them. But as I answer questions today, if there are opportunities, I will reference back to this presentation. And after doing that, we took East St. Louis School District, going from one of the lowest performing, actually the lowest performing school district in the state, and transitioning to where by the time I left, which was last year, we went from not one school being rated commendable, which is the second from the highest rating, to 40% of our schools being commendable. And that didn't just happen by me giving lip service and by doing talk. So I want to share with you a video. Stand to the side. And looking at how we use data and the work inside of East St. Louis. The actual town of East St. Louis has now held the title for the murder capital of the United States for quite some time.
I think of the word resilient, the whole community. We just have a resilient spirit.
The people of the city are friendly and they're inviting, very welcoming.
Before, we would look at data on the surface level. It was just like you're chasing your tail, still not making the impact that you're making.
We're trying to find the story behind the face of all the issues. For example, if you have a student who's not doing well in class, are they coming to school regularly? Are they behavior issues? And we've been able to unravel quite a bit of that.
I'm a mother of 5. I'm a grandmother of 8. Right now, I have 489 additional children of my own that I am responsible for.
What Domo allows us to do, it puts the data in our hands. We're allowed to design is like for us, by us, for the needs of the underlining of the work. So you can look at these assessment baseline data for Park, for example, but we know there are other entities that impact that data that's beneath that, and Domo allows us to do it. So it's given us resources and the power to make change.
By using the information within Domo, we were able to reduce our suspension rate from 32% down to 17%.
Loud and proud.
For me, it was just having a clear, concise format that allows us to make data-driven decisions.
We were able to improve our attainment with our assessments from 4% to 18%.
So in the end, when a student graduates and walks across our stage, I think we fail if we don't have a viable plan that's official for students to move on. Decisions are being grounded in facts, concrete data. You can no longer say, well, you don't know what you don't know. That's not allowed in 189. You have to know it. And, one of the key pieces of having us to know what's going on is through our use of Domo.
Every day is a new day for me. I appreciate it, having the opportunity to be in my community that I love, coming back from the schools that I attended, and to be able to support the students in our community.
If we don't educate our children, then where will our country go without it?
The community of East St. Louis will only improve if the quality of the students that we're sending through our system are there. That has to be improved in order for the city to change. Ladies and gentlemen, I just wanted to share that with you because it talks about key things: using data strategically, analyzing, making decisions grounded in a culture that did not exist in East St. Louis. And I'm not saying that doesn't exist in Rochester, but making sure that we are using the data to drive change and involving everyone, community, parents, teachers, and everyone, and students, student voice, to do that. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Horton. Speaking of data, that's a perfect segue into our first question from a student. It says, how do you plan to improve the graduation rate of African American males? Right now, the latest data that I have, 48%, 2017. What does that data tell you, and how do you plan to improve it?
So I can say, because I've been digging into the data really heavy here in Rochester, I understand that there has been a ton of work happening already around access and opportunity for students. But I'm going to talk a little bit more about how you improve graduation rates in general, and definitely for African American males. And it doesn't start in the senior year. Technically, it doesn't start in your freshman year. So in Chicago, we were introduced to, and it's 25 years of research that they've been using out of the University of Chicago Consortium. And the consortium says there's a greater indicator starting in 7th grade that can identify how students are going to perform and graduate. And that's looking at GPAs in 7th grade and also attendance rates. So for starters, if I was granted the opportunity to help lead this district, that's one of the things that we'll be doing. We're putting in our on-track data for 7th grade students across the board. And we will look at every piece of data that we look at must be looked at from a lens of equity, opportunity, and access. So you're looking at ELL, special education, African American, male, female, Hispanic. You have to look at all of those. So in your 7th grade year, we're identifying students who may be off track according to this research. And then going into their 8th grade year, we will build what we will call this bridge program for any student, any male or female, whatever race they are, that have not met the mark on the 7th grade attendance and GPA data. And that program must be grounded in a structure where we look at state assessments, which I know we have new standards. We have the New York Next Generation Standards. So making sure that we're guiding whatever assessment they're responsible for mastering at the end of that 8th grade year. We start training them on that then. But when they transition into high school, this is where the rubber meets the road. So in 9th grade, we look at freshman on track data. If you're not familiar with that, there's data. This is also out of the University of Chicago. They use it all the way in the state of, they use it in the state of Illinois. FOT is actually, you take any freshman in their first year, the research is showing that have failed more than one core subject, the percentages of them graduating on time is a lot less. So we're going to put an FOT tracker in place. That's for your freshman year. And we're looking at all students. African-American males, definitely, for sure. In your sophomore year, we put something in place. When you look at the research showing students typically lose them between 15 and 16 years old. That's your sophomore, junior year. So we put something in place in Phillips, my high school, but also in East St. Louis. It's called sophomore half-cap graduation ceremony. So we identify students at the end of the first semester freshman year. If you have failed a course and you're a freshman, we then we reach out to your parents. If we can't get your parents, we redesign your schedule if there's opportunity to do that, or we put you in evening programs or an online program depending on the student, and then we transition them to, we make sure that they get that credit before they finish their freshman year. Sophomore year, I'll talk quickly. Sophomore year, we do the half-cap ceremony. We recognize students who's on track to graduate, who've earned all their freshman credits as well as half of their sophomore credits. We have a ceremony. We have the board come out. We shake hands, community members, and then we send them to have some fun somewhere because 2 years of high school is hard, right? If you think about it, it's tough. Junior year, we do ACT or SAT prep. Either for some, we start that in the summer. Others, we do it during the course of the school year. We offer that. We pay for it as a district. And in partnership with a community partner in East St. Louis, paid for half of our students to take this course. And then your junior year, at the end, you're tagged with what we call a post-secondary coach. And a post-secondary coach will help you write your personal statement in your junior year, so as you prepare for your senior year to go into college, career, military, trade, your personal statements are already written, and I'm sure there'll be an opportunity to dive in deeper into that senior year. So hold that senior year thought right there, because I see she's getting ready to give me the hook. All right, okay, I'm gonna slow down too. I'm getting a signal from the corner over there.
90 seconds, that's how much you get.
Okay, all right.
Okay, so another student question. How would you deal with racism in schools?
Yeah, one of the great things about going into Jefferson County, I walked right into the district where they passed a racial equity policy. And the racial equity policy is direct, it's intense, and it is an investment from the school board to say that we're going to look at disproportionality of special education representation, disproportionality of suspension rates for minority students, African American, Hispanic. Actually, African American, Hispanic, and all of the different sectors. We also look at underrepresentation of minorities and gifted and talented. As strategically, are we offering gifted and talented not just in the IQ range, but are we offering gifted and talented in the arts? Are we offering gifted and talented in leadership? Because those are different. There are different targets for leadership. Are we offering that? So the racial equity plan put that in place. The other piece, and it's a longer than 90-second response, but it's heavy. Racism, I mean, it's a serious topic across the country. And so the other piece that we do, every single school has to create what we call equity plans. These equity plans are supported, the district, we have invested in what we call equity resource teachers by zones, so every single school has access to a resource teacher that specializes in providing equitable support and work. And they're in the union, they're teachers. And they have been identified for being culture responsive and using multicultural strategies in their class. They were identified, and they go into these schools and help design these equity plans. Once the equity plans are designed and created, there's a process, because what gets monitored gets improved. We have what we call these empty visits, where the equity monitoring protocol tool, where those resource teachers, along with your central office support, goes into your building, and they pull your data, and they give you recommendations, or they highlight strengths of your equity plan that you're fully implementing and areas where you need to give more attention to, and then they provide support. It's not coming in and saying you're not doing it and walk away and give you a score. It's coming in and say, you know what, I see you put this down on your plan that you want some support in these areas. Here is the support. And so, and then the other piece, when you talk about achievement gap, and people say there's the opportunity gap, but there is an expectation gap in many instances, and those gaps have to be addressed. So we do implicit bias training district-wide. We had a district-wide leadership training on this book called Black Male by Alfred Tatum. It was powerful, and we had schools to respond to the different concerns or the highlights that stimulate their thought around, wow, I didn't think like this when it came to African-American male. But if I was here, I would want to do the same thing for all the populations, African-American, male, Hispanic, the whole nine, and do district-wide book studies to support that. And then the last thing, we have equity institutes that happen twice a year that every single staff goes to and to attend, and we bring in local and national representations of who are masters of identifying and supporting racial equity work. And it's been really powerful. And there's some data I want to highlight here, I'll show you later, that has showed how we view data in all of our schools in our district from an equity lens. Sorry.
So one of the things you just talked about was, different trainings for teachers when it comes to implicit bias and all of that. A lot of times whenever we try to, start these district-wide initiatives for reform, a lot of the stress is put on teachers. So how do you address the emotional well-being of teachers? That's a question from our audience.
Yes, so there's, get this right. All right, so on this slide here, we talk about support. Teachers, because you got your students, which is your number one priority, but your teachers are second, they're second in this work. Teachers have to be equipped, strategically equipped to support all types of students. And while it may appear as if teachers are taking on the brunt of the work, central office and school leadership have to develop the skills to be able to support those teachers. As we provide teachers with additional expectation, we have to pull things off their plate. That's too common in education, where we give teachers, here's a new way to support this, and then we continue to have them doing X, Y, Z. Strategically, we have to, as we give them new expectations for trainings and opportunity, you also have to look at what we've been doing in the past that was not working and remove it. And we have to keep a consistent focus, and that comes through a couple of things. Identifying pathways for careers. Not every teacher wants to be a principal or an AP. But some can be great coaches. Some are technology leads. We have to create that career ladder so that they can receive these opportunities. And we have to be intentional about providing that. The other piece is incentivizing. I don't think it's necessary that you incentivize for performance, but you incentivize for effort. And as they are beginning to step outside of their comfort zone for teaching, providing PDs that they find valuable. So that's one end. It just can't be about what we think is right, but also professional development that teachers feel that they need. And there's a whole process that I use to develop that.
All right. In Rochester, we have a very great, large Spanish-speaking population. So how do you plan on supporting students and families who are not from this country and struggle with English? That's from a student.
All right. Can I get more than 90 seconds on this one, please? I'm serious. This is deep. So when you speak about our non-English speaking population and our ELL students, I want to think about these from 3 ways. The first one being, number one, it has to be support for the student, but also we have to provide support for the parents and the families, right? How does that look? For students, when you go into classrooms, when you think about ELL, a lot of times it's looked at as a negative or as a deficit, when in actuality you have students who are coming to Rochester and JCPS as well that are above their grade level and they are literate in their native language. So when you're talking about providing support, those are students that will be putting ESL classes that's maybe a level 2 that may be 6 to 9 months providing supports, which you guys have that. Then you have the second tier of students who are not necessarily literate in their native language, but they're also they're skilled, but they're familiar with the structure of school, and you have to put them in a longer-term program and support where they are receiving training to understand, to catch up in their native language, because the goal is not to eliminate their native language. The goal should be bilingualism for all of our ELL students. Like, it's not a negative thing. It is additive to be able to speak a different language, and we're teaching you to learn English. So teaching you English and also catching you up so that you can be literate. Those should exist in your traditional schools as well, which is a year program, sometimes two. Then the third type of student are students who come to us who have had trauma and experienced things that we have no clue what that looks like. So we should have, those are the students that typically are good candidates for our newcomer academies, where they don't have the true concept, potentially, of how school works. They're not literate in their native language, and definitely don't speak English, and that takes a longer time to support those students. But once you do that, then you have to also think about the strategy and how you deliver support. So some strategies that I'm used to doing in classes for our ELL, number one, respecting their culture and being culture responsive in their teaching. What does that mean? Honoring and making sure that the class understands that students are different, they have different backgrounds, and you recognize and celebrate. Example, today is Cinco de Mayo. So for my Mexican family and community, happy Cinco de Mayo to you, right? Those are things that are important, right? The other piece is when you transition that the vocabulary has to be taught across the curriculum, not just in English, but in math, science, history, and social studies. I'm going to move faster. Emphasizing the importance of productive language. So there's a process that you use as the acronym SWIRL. Speak it, write it, interact, read it, and listen. You have to give all of our students the opportunity to do that. And then there's the process of using different modalities so that they can be exposed to that, using potentially one as a QSSA model, which is, as a teacher, you create these questions, you create signals in your class. If this was a classroom and I'm teaching and I have ELL students in here, we create signals. So if there's some things that you don't understand, you give me a thumbs up or sideways, and if you got it, whatever it may be. And then you also have the opportunity for them you create sentence stems where the key vocabulary words is what they're focusing on in English, not the whole sentence. And then the last one, you share and you assess. And then finally, I said this earlier, being bilingual is the goal. Making sure that you also use their native language to help teach them, and that's important. So families, bringing them into the building, right? Getting them in, making sure that you have literature that's consistently designed in a different native language, that's the majority of your building. And lastly, one thing that I would love to do, if this does not exist, I would love to create a translation center, if it doesn't exist, where we have the majority of our native-speaking populations represented by someone from the community or a staff member that we hire. And if I go into school 107 or 318, or whatever the school we go into, and I speak a different language, that secretary, the administrator can go to this Skype or this Zoom, and we Zoom in and we have a three-way meeting. You have myself as an administrator, you have the translator right there on the screen, and you have the family. That's how you support students who come from different countries and don't speak the native language.
Interesting idea. We're going to switch gears a little bit to talk about you. Okay. Throughout your career, you just talked a little bit about the different positions that you've held. The last one in Louisville, you were only there for about a year, right?
Yes.
Talk to us a little bit about why just that short time, and what does that mean about your intentions here in Rochester?
It's a very good question, and it's a question that I would ask as well. So just to give you a quick, I was in Chicago Public Schools for 14 years, and realizing that there's more opportunity and there's more to be done. And when you look at the political climate of Chicago at times, there were some things that I couldn't get done because moving up the ladder was different. And when East St. Louis came into my school in Phillips to see what we were doing, I connected with them. And I went into one of the most challenging districts. It's similar to Rochester to some degree, and I went in with a focus. Like, I have a true passion for supporting marginalized students. I was one of them, and I understand change it happens at the classroom, but you only can control that population of students that you're serving. And so I wanted to do more. So I went into East St. Louis. I finished my doctorate in May of last year. Technically, I defended, but I was at a university that did not allow you to get your superintendent endorsement until you actually graduated across the stage. I couldn't walk into December, so they wouldn't give me my superintendent endorsement. I talked to my superintendent in East St. Louis, which he wanted me to stay. He wanted me to be the heir to his throne, but he had 4 more years, and I felt like I needed some other experiences with larger districts, diverse population, and so JCPS came along, and they were right at the crossroads where the state was threatening to take over, very similar to where we are now. And the superintendent there, he had been a principal in the district for 10 years and been there 21 years. He went from the principal seat to superintendency of 101,000 students. And so he needed someone who had central office experience that can help lead the transformational work in his district. And I talked to my superintendent in St. Louis, and he felt that it was a good idea. I hated to leave, they hated to see me go, but it was also opportunity for other families to actually propel and give the opportunity. And so I went into JCPS with the superintendent understanding that I was going to be there for a short window, and he understood that. We had a long conversation about it, and I can honestly say I've had a great impact in JCPS, which I'll talk about a little bit in this presentation whenever I get the moment. But I've gotten a lot from JCPS, and I really believe that what I've learned from there has really helped me to be a great candidate for Rochester in regards to that.
Well, when it comes to Rochester, how do you see yourself fitting into this community, and how long do you intend to stay?
I said in my interview originally, I said as 20 years, right? I'll just say this, as we sit here today, Dr. Freddie Thomas, the school being named after the gentleman here, he's not a native of Rochester, he wasn't. But he had great value and the community respects him, and I believe that I can bring the same type of value to this community, and I plan on being here. When you look at those last few years, I've never moved into the same position, and I've never been a superintendent. My goal is to stay. Right now, my family, they're not moving anymore. They say, wherever you go, if this is where you are, you can go anywhere else, but we're going to stay. And we're not going to keep moving around like that. We want to enjoy life, and we want to be a part of the Rochester family and the Rochester community. I really believe that this is a great partnership in my skill set, and my experience, and my passion, and my disruptive style leadership with a collaborative approach can help move the district and continue the great work that has been started here.
All right. So this is a question from a parent. Parents in the Rochester City School District get lip service. They are told they are welcome in schools, but in fact are not. They are not respected by teachers or administrators. The only way for parents to advocate is through the law or the media. How do you propose to include parents, to support parents, and to help teachers and administrators understand the value of truly welcoming parents, caregivers, and families into the classroom?
Okay. Part of this motion towards excellence was, when I designed it, this was really locked in to identify community, parents, opportunity. And so while we were, I think there's research. You guys can tell I'm an advocate of University of Chicago. Happened to be there, and they were helpful to me as I led my school. But there's research that talks about these 5 key essential elements that exist in every single highly effective school, whether it's a high poverty, whether it's affluent, wherever it may be. And those 5 are, number 1 being change leadership at the top. Number 2, creating a professional learning climate where teachers feel the need to get to do more and want to learn more, that efficacy piece that when you talk about John Hattie's work. The third one is the strong parent, family, community engagement. And I'm not just speaking from bringing them in on parents' nights. We're thinking about, it's more about having parents as an asset. Every single school, if I was to become superintendent of Rochester, these 5 pillars, I just named 3, the other 2 being learning environments that's conducive for learning for students as well as adults, and then the 4th one being strong instructional culture, which that'll come up. Every single school will have to build a platform where they have identified strategies, projects, and systems to build strong family community engagement. One example being, we have parents who can't make it to teacher conferences, who can't come to the school. So at the beginning of the year, I think it's important that we identify schools at the school level where, all right, if you can't make it to parent-teacher conference, here we can Skype in at these times. And it may not be in the evening. Parents work. A lot of life is happening, giving them opportunities to do that. The other part to that is when I think about how to connect the board, the community, and the parents, we have to go out to them. And an example for me, what I would love to implement here is once a month, one board member, we identify a community in their area that we go to, and we go knock on doors. And not only just knock on doors to talk, we're trying to get libraries in all of our classrooms. We talk about the literacy gap and how that exists in many of the impoverished communities and African American communities. Exposure to literature and books, and I can tell you a lot of them don't have home libraries. But we want to get community partners to purchase community libraries where we go and knock on doors, we give this to our families, and we talk to them about great things and other ways that we can happen. The last thing, I want to create a parent university. I built one in East St. Louis, and Parent University is designed where we offer courses. When you think about our ELL families, why not teach them, why not give them an opportunity to become bilingual? Teaching them English in the classrooms. Why not teach them how to do resume writing? Why not give them job opportunities? In East St. Louis, we had these parent university sessions, and if you attended 8 of them, you were eligible to come to a job fair that we brought in the community members and gave. We got 40 jobs for parents. Some were through temp agencies, but just opportunity to show parents we care. It's more than just saying come to the school and help us with a field trip. It's really about we want to help you to become better, and we need you to help us to become better, because you can give us ideas and strategies on how to reach our students.
Interesting thought there. So if ever you're so fortunate to be selected for this position, what would your first 90 days look like?
Three L's. Look, listen, and learn. The Distinguished Educator Report has given me a ton of knowledge and information, and looking at the response from the board and looking at the quarterly reports have given me a lot of knowledge of areas of concern. But that's great to read, but what's really important is that I must get out and I must get into the community and say, I want to have a meeting at the local church. I want to have a meeting at the local community center, and we don't just go in there just for the fun of it. We do keep, stop, start sessions where we talk about what's working that you are aware of in the district that we need to keep, things that you think about we need to stop that's not working, and things that you would like to see us do. And we take this and we go on a community tour, and we meet with the teachers union, we meet with administration, we go into our schools, we talk to the board consistently, and we go and we identify areas with things that are aligning with the Distinguished Educator Report that says that's working well. We will enhance and improve, but areas that the Distinguished Educator Report says is not working well, that we will put the effort in. So my 30, 60, 90-day plan, first 30 is really about look, listen, and learning. Next 30 through 60 is about assessing, and then at 90 up to the 90 days, we begin to identify plans and correlating and going back to the path forward, looking at that path forward strategic plan and making adjustments, like key adjustments, major adjustments, to make it fit and flow to what's needed to improve outcomes for the district.
All right, so how do you address students who are not successful in a traditional school setting?
Yes. So it's, when you think about the design, I know there are 9 different alternative type of programmings that we offer here in the district. But in JCPS, we are redesigning our alternative programs. So one being, we're looking at our students who are in alternative school for, I would say, you could say, who've had major issues with behavior, and we're going to actually we're designing more like a career academy for those students. There's different organizations that we have out here that allow us to put different CTE program offerings inside of alternative schools, which is great. I would also want to do a lot of the work around social emotional support for those students. Many of our students who thrive in alternative environments, typically there's other supports that we need to have. So I would say working with a community agency and providing trauma support, or you can call them health counselors for every one of those schools. And then the other thing, offering curriculum in different ways. So there's an idea that I would love to test out where we have students who come to school Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, but on Tuesdays and Thursdays, in partnership with local businesses, they're going out and doing internships, learning how to get in certifications in different areas, there's certifications that you can receive at Pennzoil and different companies that's currently businesses in the area. And I think we have to give them hope. Like when you have students in alternative setting that don't fit in the traditional model, the main piece is hope. They have to know when they come to school, waking up every morning, that it is a purpose. And we can't think about if they've been unsuccessful in our traditionally structured school, why in the world would we want to design schools in the alternative realm that look the same? And so just giving them something different and different options.
All right, so this is a big one. In our community, we deal with, unfortunately, a lot of trauma. Last night, I was just covering a shooting. A group of kids walks by and says, it's just another shooting. Somebody's dead. I mean, so many of our students deal with mental health trauma, PTSD. How do you address that in students as young as elementary school?
So I'm going to start with the teacher end. And unfortunately, in education, we expect teachers to be these miracle workers. and have all of these tools. But one thing that we're doing in JCPS, you may not know this, but Louisville has a really high crime rate. And we've lost, this year alone, since I've been there, 9 students to suicide. And so next school year, we will be putting a mental health counselor in every single school. Some of our schools will receive 2, continuing to train teachers. But when you think about teachers who are consistently receiving the trauma, there's a such thing as secondhand trauma. So we have to find ways to support our teachers. We can't just dump expectation and say, well, you know, you have 13 students who come from these different homes and these different backgrounds, and they're experiencing death at this rate, and we want you to solve all of it. No, we can't do that. We got to find ways to provide the support in partnership with the union on how we're going to support our teachers who are experiencing that. And then also for our students, we have to give them that. I think the other piece that I want to put in there is OLS bullying prevention. Every single school in about 2 years, because it's a very large district in JCPS, we just started the training. There's a training that we're taking our schools through. They have unique teams that come out, and these teams are actually responsible for identifying students who have been bullied, students who have the tendency to bully, and students who may be experiencing suicidal thoughts. I would want us to build that very similar structure here in our district. And I'll tell you, when you think about community schools and businesses, this is an area where we can really lock in on and help our students.
Of course. So when it comes to our graduation rate, right now we're sitting at 59%. There's been a 10% improvement over the last 10 years, but how do you go deeper than that? How do you make sure that those students that are walking across the stage are not just getting a piece of paper, but instead walking into the next phase of their life?
I promise I need more than 90 seconds, but I'm going to go until you say that's enough. When you look on this board, what you're seeing on the right-hand side, there's a process that I built when I was in Phillips as a principal. I was noticing we didn't have students have an opportunity. The goal was just to get them to graduate. When they graduated, it was great to graduate, but there was no plan. So this post-secondary push plan that I designed, I spoke about the 7th grade aspect. I spoke about 9th grade, what we would do, 10th grade, and 11th. But in your senior year, every single student will be what we would identify. They were put in these cohorts, and this is something I would like to bring to this district if possible, talking with the key players, of course, key stakeholders. Every single student, we took highest ACT scores and highest GPAs, and we put them in one cohort. Now, those students didn't attend classes together in their senior year, because they remember at the end of their junior year, their personal statements are already written. They've already been placed with a cohort coach, right? Post-secondary coach. And so these individuals have these scores and they have these aspirations. Cohort 2, second tier of ACT, GPA. Cohort 3, the same one. And cohort 4, 14 and under on ACT and GPAs under 2.0. And so with this structure, you then set up where these students are receiving, we've identified colleges, career opportunities, and military opportunities for every single cohort. And we go through, it's really deep. We have hundreds and hundreds of opportunities we've identified. And so these cohort coaches are responsible for working with these students individually to identify the path. Now, how does this work? Your senior year, you have to apply to at least 5, either college opportunities, career, or military, or a combination of 5, right? Required in order to participate in senior activities in your senior year, and we strategically set so many have to be done by a certain benchmark. You have to complete your FAFSA, and we bring in experts to come support families, even for the undocumented students, which is a challenge in many instances to get them the opportunity to find financial aid for school. And then you do a community service project, 2 of them. Over the course of your, also I forgot to mention this, your freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year, we do college tours for all students. Freshman year, we're taking you to community colleges. Every student will experience at least one community college. Second year, you experience a regional located 4-year college. You go to a college tour there. Junior year, you do colleges that may be a little bit within the surrounding states. And your senior year, through partnership and through grants through Gear Up, we're able to take you all into different parts of different segments of the country. And so after you do these 5 things and you have these coaches making sure that they're done, at the end of your senior year, we have this signing day. We don't just do signing day for our athletes. We do it for everyone, and it's a really big event. And I'm I get a little choked up sometimes when you see certain students you've been knowing for a while, and they're graduating and they're going off to college or the military, and they have a plan. But what I want to point out to you up here, this part is really powerful. When this structure that I'm speaking of, this post-secondary push plan, it was designed, and in 2014, the year before I came to East St. Louis, they only had the same size class, only $389,000 in scholarship earnings. They only had 39% of the students were accepted into college, military, college, or trade, and they had an 8% dropout rate. If you look at the years as we continue to and sharpen that structure, the post-secondary push plan, you can see $4.6 million, 97% accepted, 5% dropout rate. $6.5 million, 98%, 5% dropout rate, and so on and so forth. And I'll talk about 2017. There's going to be a little clip that I may get time to show, it may not, at the end, where we had these phenomenal, amazing athletes. One gentleman will probably be in the NFL next year. That was in this class, and he had some really big-time scholarship offerings. But this is how the work is set up. And how do you know it's working? When we look at our college retention after 12 years and 16 months, we're seeing 60% average. When I first came, it was like 41. So students are staying in the school, and because we're matching them into the good fit. So.
All right. So when you were introducing yourself, you talked to us a little bit about a story of a student who was illiterate. Mm-hmm. What's your strategy for helping children become independent readers, writers, speakers, and thinkers by 4th grade?
So I was introduced to balanced literacy, guided reading, and workshop model. These are different names. Back in 2007 when I was at the elementary school. At the time, I didn't necessarily say that I didn't think that it worked. And so in East St. Louis and in JCPS, we're working with Jan Richardson, who's helping support our workshop model. And the workshop model works this way: in our kindergarten through 5th grade, students will be exposed in these workstations, and that's happening in some parts of the district now. And it has to be done strategically. So they're exposed to writing, reading, listening to read, vocabulary, and comprehension at these different stations every single day. Some things that I've done, and I don't know how the time works here in the state of New York, but I'll find out rather quickly. We do 120-minute literacy blocks in Illinois, and they're receiving 120 minutes of literacy every single day in East St. Louis, and we have seen some amazing results. So, and then the other thing that we've done in East St. Louis that I thought was really powerful, we put together this 3rd grade reading community support program where we have volunteers to sign up, and on Saturdays, local business and community opened up their doors, and we had volunteers to go in, and they were helping students with their reading along the way, and we did that for about maybe 4 months. We didn't revisit it after that because getting the volunteerism in East St. Louis is a challenge, but I know here in Rochester, I don't see that being an issue as far as getting people to come in and help our students.
We do have one of the highest volunteerism rates in the country. But another thing I want to talk about is attendance. Throughout the years, the district has had a perpetual problem getting students to even come to school. How do you make students want to come to school and address the possible barriers that might be preventing them from getting to school?
Yes. So there's when I spoke earlier about those 5 elements, one being under the instructional realm. There has to be. It can't continue to be heavy lift from a teacher and a principal having to get students in the seats. That really needs to be a district focus. So some things that we're doing currently, we are doing campaigns, and every single school is responsible for building an attendance system at their respective schools, and their attendance is viewed. It's viewed we look at it. Well, actually, I don't have attendance up here, but we have attendance that's viewed every single month by zones, which is all of the Zone 3 elementary. And then we also do what we call these reality checks. And these reality checks to each assistant suit that have about 30 schools apiece, I designed this. These individuals, they go in and the schools come in, they look at attendance, behavior, referrals, the whole 9, and they look at these individual attendance plans and they give feedback, and they also ask, where else can we help you? And so the last thing I want to talk about with attendance, it's an organization that we are in the works of working with in JCPS that I believe would be great for Rochester. It's called In Class Today. In Class Today takes the burden of grind of going knocking on doors, and they've done research out of the University of Harvard. See, it's not just University of Chicago, but out of the University of Harvard, where they have used a process in which they redesign the letters. They go home to parents. The research is saying the letters that go home to parents is written at certain writ levels and sometimes parents, it's a lot of writing, a lot of jargon. Oftentimes we have parents that may not know that their child has missed 14 days. It's important to show Devon Horton has missed 14, his class average has missed 6. And putting things into perspective and sending it to them, and they have yielded some amazing results. They work with Los Angeles Public Schools, Chicago Public Schools, San Diego, and there's some reports that I have gotten from them where they have the district has garnered about $15 million a year because attendance has improved through these efforts. And it's fairly new. It's been happening for maybe 5 years, but it has shown we're actually in conversation. And the last thing about that, the district doesn't pay for the service. We find a foundation or a community organization that pays for the service. So, yeah.
All right. So this is a question from someone in our audience. How do you propose to work effectively with the Board of Education described by this distinguished educator as dysfunctional?
So, so here's a plus of being able to working in different districts, right? Everyone thinks that their situation is the worst. I promise you guys, there are worse situations. When I look at the board meetings and I hear them speaking, a lot of times they're speaking about passion. They're committed to making change, but there are some things that can be done better. So I tell my employees my team that I supervise, oftentimes they say, I tell them in the beginning, while I'm responsible for coaching and guiding you, you are responsible for managing me. That same concept goes for me with the school board as well. I have to find a way to manage 7 and get them to turn into a voice of 1. Now, definitely not an easy task, but it starts with, I don't want to say the word training, but we have to professional development of how relationships work. And it's not always just professional development about just governance in general, but just what are best practices and how do you move organizations. There's some research that I would like to share with the board when it's time that have shown when you have highly effective boards, you won't find a highly effective school district that doesn't have a highly effective school board. And the board it is a challenging task that they have on their hand to lead this work. And I believe as a superintendent, my leadership role is to help manage and help them process ideas so they can navigate. And again, me being as a superintendent, if I'm selected, I have to be the voice and the face of that. Behind closed doors, the goal would be to get us together and we battle. Because if there's a bunch of yes men, I'm not a yes man, going on in that back room, you will have some challenges, and you're pushing the weight in the mail of not necessarily what's best for students. But when we come out from behind those closed doors, we have to be unified, one sound, one voice, as we talk about making change and making decisions.
All right, it comes from the top. So you talked a little bit about your experience in school districts that have high poverty rates. Rochester, of course, is no different. We have one of the highest child poverty rates in the country. So share your thoughts and experience about the importance of integration and desegregation to break down the negative effects of concentrated poverty.
Okay, somebody must have been in one of our cabinet meetings back in JCPS. Who was there? Who sent that? So here's what's happening. In JCPS currently, we are, and this is connected to this question, we are going through what we call a student assignment plan, revisiting. When I read about a lot of the budget concerns, not a lot, but some of the budget concerns and the racial issues that exist with the institutionalized racism and things of that nature that I read about here in this district, I notice that there has to be a collective. So how do I address that particular piece around desegregation and diversifying our student pipeline? That's not something that I need to do on my own. I need to bring in stakeholders from teachers union, because we're doing this now in JCPS, from the community, parents, different constituents in the city, and we need to do an advisory committee and do a study, do some surveys, because here's the thing. What I found in JCPS, while one population or one group of individuals value diversity, there's a whole different set that don't value it. And then there's a different set of value of that. They want to prioritize that will prioritize equity over desegregation, And we have to, it's not a simple answer. So it has to be an advisory committee where we build it out over the course of the next year or two, designing a plan to look at student assignment. And I can jump into this next one. I don't know what the question is, but I'm going to say part of student assignment will also impact budget. And it can impact it in a positive or negative way depending on how the student assignment plan is designed. So.
All right, so one of the most disappointing things to me about our school district is you might have one school that is achieving so high. They might have a 95% graduation rate. You go across town, you have another that has not that. So how will you encourage a culture of collaboration among schools in order to grow the bright spots that are happening in our district?
So I want to go 5,000 feet first. So number one, no matter what the school is, whether it's a School of the Arts, whether it's East, whether it's any school in our district, there are those 5 elements that must exist. So if I become superintendent, every single school will be responsible for designing a plan around those 5 key elements that I spoke about. That's first. And then when you get into that instructional piece and you're talking about graduation rate and student performance, the other part to that that's challenging is when we think about instruction, I was responsible for building out this instructional framework and JCPS. So collaboration is important, but also it's imperative that these key 5 exist at every school. So I would say, number one, every single school must have a system in which they support teachers to deconstruct standards. You have new standards that are coming out right now. So we have to make sure the students can deconstruct, write lesson plans, design quality lessons, right? And it has to be standards driven. Number 2, we must understand that there has to be a culture for identifying data. I've read and heard that there are some professional learning communities that exist in certain schools. PLCs have to become a norm and consistently across the entire district. We're currently working with 101,000 students. We're building PLC culture across the entire district. There's a whole plan for that. That's in System 2. System 3, instructional framework. From math, science, reading, music, art, there needs to be instructional framework designed and built by the union and the administrators together of what are best practices for planning, delivering instruction, the whole 9. Number 4, you must have you have to progress monitor students all the time consistently. So every school must have a system for progress monitoring that we will evaluate and provide support for in areas that they're not connected in. System 5 was strictly about behavior and academic interventions. Systems that must exist in every single school when you talk about how do you get these outcomes that are different. Because I will tell you, when you go into these different schools, number 1, you're probably going to find the way students are placed is going to be different. And then you're also going to not have a consistent flow of expectation. And so that's what I bring, consistency and cohesiveness. And System 6, the last one, which is the biggest one, I believe, is that administrators must become instructional leaders if they're not. I'm sure we have that here where they're doing it, and it's not just about going in classrooms and giving feedback to teachers, but it's a process where you go into classrooms as a thought partner, with frequency, you give feedback while that's at the end of your visit, but then there's coaching sessions that must happen within a cycle of 6 to 9 weeks for every single teacher, and not every single teacher. I'm gonna say this and I'm done. They're not on the same scale. So you have teachers, 16% are novice teachers. They're new or may not have developed to the rate that they need. On the other end, you have another 16% that are high-performing frequent flyers that you need to use to develop your other teachers. And in the middle, you have those who've transitioned from novice to they know what's going on, but not quite over the top. And then you have that third tier of teachers who typically, they're highly effective, but if you don't support them, they can easily slip back in. And teachers, principals, and administrators have to go in to give that support. Collaboration happens across the board in our weekly meetings. Monthly meetings with administrators. They're not just meetings, they're professional developments for assistant principals and principals across the entire district.
All right, we're getting down to our last 10 minutes, probably a little less than that now. So everybody has a plan, to keep schools safe. A lot of people think they have the answer. So what are your experiences with implementing strategies to keep schools safe?
So safety, and I look at it in multiple ways. There's the internal safety you have to provide, and I think that comes from creating there's a huge investment in restorative practice here in this district. The implementation of restorative, it has to be done authentically so that adults and students can understand. I also believe that in order for it to really work, you have to find a process in which you're going to train. When I brought up Restorative to East St. Louis, we trained some community members and parents, and in that Phillips Academy, we trained some students in Restorative. So I think that's creating a culture where everyone is respected. The other piece is, as I spoke about those 5 tenets, one being creating a learning environment that's conducive for learning for all students. Equipping, I go back to this again, next to the students, our teachers are our most precious asset next to the student. And we have to make sure that they have everything that they need in regards to behavior management cycles developed with central office and the building teachers to support that, so that they can have a structure for how discipline is handled and addressing even some of the disproportionality of discipline and referrals when you look at that. And then from the outside, I think that takes a community. The community, we need to get together and identify what do we want. Are we okay with our students going, and I've been in 2 different worlds, going through metal detectors. And in 2 of my districts, it was okay, it was acceptable. One district, they don't accept, having students having to walk through metal detectors. And I understand why it's important. In this last one, I have this near peer support. If we really want safe schools, we have to focus on students to do 3 things. Develop their leadership skills, right? Their capacity, and in the student piece, I'll show a little video, but not in here. We have to develop leadership intentionally for students. We have to make sure that they have community priorities and community focus, that they are providing supports to value their impact on the community. And the last one, which I thought was important, peer accountability. When you think about the great work, and I was able to lead and build this affinity work in Chicago with my school, we got a grant from AT&T and been recognized for this affinity work where students were responsible for coaching and supporting each other in regards to their behavior. We had an incident where a group of young men were going to come to the school and shoot up some of the other guys because one of the other guys had allegedly stole a cell phone from the other guy's girlfriend, and our affinity leaders actually interacted and got involved before I even knew about it and stopped that incident, and I was able to meet with both sides. And like that typically don't happen. You got to have your students involved in that. And it's not as simple as what I described, but it's a process.
Of course. So last question. What are your thoughts about including RCSD leaders, many of whom have a track record of success in your efforts to improve the district?
Like, I can't do this without them. The leaders that's currently in place, what I've identified, one district I went in where, actually I'd say both, the leadership was there. It was just really about providing the opportunity and the guidance and the word that everyone kind of toys around with, but it's important, accountability. So I would definitely include them in. So like everything I spoke about today is not something I'm just coming in and saying we're gonna do this in this district. I'm just giving examples of how I've worked in the past, and I believe that some of these experiences we can design the structures that are similar, that fit, and it can work for Rochester students and for the Rochester teaching staff and community. So that is I'm big on leadership development. I've worked with, I brought new leaders, it's a national organization that specializes in developing turnaround leaders. I brought them into 2 districts now. I brought them into East St. Louis. I wrote a grant for the U.S. Department of Ed. I actually wrote the grant for $7 million to build the teacher residency and the leadership development. And then we just brought them into JCPS for the first time, and we're actually taking them to another level next year. Hopefully I'll be here, who knows. But that is, I believe in developing leaders that are currently in-house. I've had great success with that.
I know I said that was the last question, but I think it might be time for one more. Oh, look, 3 more. Look at that, if you stay within your 90 seconds. Oh, 3 minutes. Oh. Okay, so talk to me a little bit about, what do you see in the district that we should keep, and what do you see that should probably be changed, and your thoughts on all of that?
Oh, that's a trick question. So I'll say keeping, you have your pre-K program is nationally recognized. I think that has to stay. We have to find ways to get all of our students involved in this city if we can. If I'm thinking about doing things differently, when I looked at the budget, and no budget questions came up, but when I look at the budget, I think about there has to be, when we think about our transportation, and while it is recognized for its efficiency, I think we need to look at our scheduling of our schools to cut down cost. And tier routing is important. I think there's of course, when you think about changing bell schedule times, that affects families and children and how they go to school. But if we do it strategically, I believe that can happen. The other piece is when we're making decisions about, and I've watched all the board meetings around budget and reading the budget reports, when we're making decisions around programming, eliminating or adding, we have to make sure that we go on take everything through a cycle of performance an evaluation, program evaluation process where we're identifying, looking at students' performance, looking at the individuals who are responsible for it, and tying dollars to the performance. Again, you heard me say in the video, you can't say you don't know what you don't know. No, we do know. We know where the dollars went. So we have to be able to we look at the performance of the students connected to the individuals involved, and then we make decisions on with our budget that way. We just can't say if reading scores are not what they need to be, that we just throw, and this is that was a hot topic, so I'm bringing it up, that we just throw reading teachers on the scene, because that's not necessarily the answer. So we want to look at programming from a program evaluation lens.
Okay, 1 minute left. So, lastly, how do you see yourself interacting with the students?
Well, I can't show the video because I only got 1 minute, but a couple of things. I want to form a superintendent student advisory committee where we meet monthly. We may even set it up where we do some of them virtually, where because we can't just we may get a bus and have them go around and pick up the students. We could do that, right? But I want to create an agenda where they can share concerns that they're seeing and also some of the ideas. That's one way. The other one, here's what I'm going to say. Athletics and arts is important. It's a 1 minute, 39-second video. I was able to bring in, because our students deserve it.
You gotta do it now if you're gonna do it.
Yeah, our students deserve it. When you get to the 89 blocks, run that. No, I'm just joking. All right, I always want to do that. Give me the beat. So there's I know I have a corny sense of humor. There's this, it's important that we bring in national organizations to see what we're doing. There's great work happening here in the playing fields, in the classroom. And so I brought in Sports Illustrated to Phillips and also to East St. Louis, and they happened to follow us for a full season. And we ended up winning a state championship. And we were nominated for an Sports Emmy for this documentary. And I have my little cameo. It's called 89 Blocks. I'm not in this one, but I want you to take a look at of ways that I interact with students, and you'll see.
You should take a closer look sometimes, because a closer look forces you to really think about what you're seeing, what you're doing, what you're discovering.
Fuck ball. You're not talking about basketball.
And I hired this basketball coach in Chicago at work also.
They're going to kill y'all. They're going to kill y'all, man.
If sports teach you one thing, it's that everything is worth believing in. A kid without a chance, a place without hope, a story you never thought you'd hear. Believe in them all, and that'll change the way you look at the world, the way you talk to people about what you know.
Together on 3, family on 6. 1, 2, 3. 4, 5, 6. Family.
Come on back! I got your back! Come on back! I got your back! Yo, you scared! You got to breathe, Taquan!
You really should take a closer look. Your chance is coming.
And so you guys can have an opportunity if you wanted to pull it up. But just two things quickly, really quick. The young man in the DOC, like I've had a lot of successes that I talked about that class in my first year. I have a gentleman, Gianno Caldwell, who's a analyst. He's a Republican analyst for, I believe, Fox. You can check him on Sundays and things like that. But I also have students where I've not been so successful. There's times where I haven't been as successful where the young man with the DLC, I'm going to be honest, it's a young man that I sent to that school or in Chicago, Marquise Pryor, and we just couldn't get him off the streets. So I can't do this by myself, We need community. We need everyone to wrap around our students. And this is, in closing this out, the guy speaks about, I got your back, you got my back. If I'm selected to be your superintendent, I'll have yours, and I just need you to have mine, and we do this together. So.
Thank you, Dr. Horton.
Thanks again, Dr. Horton, and thank you, Casey, very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take about a 15-minute recess, and we'll begin again promptly at 2 with our next candidate. Good afternoon once more, folks. And again, on behalf of the Board of Education, let me welcome you to this, our 2019 forum on our search for the next superintendent of schools. You may have heard me say some of this before, but for those of you who are new with us, the restrooms are located right outside this door. It's 2 left-hand turns. If you turn left at the registration table, and then there's a little corridor immediately to your left. With those 2 left-hand turns, you'll find the restrooms. In the event that we have an emergency, which is unlikely, but nonetheless, if that does happen, we have 3 exits from the room, one by the registration table, one over to your left, and the one immediately in the back of the room. So that's what we'll do in the event we have to evacuate. In terms of our format, like the first session, our candidate will have the opportunity to introduce himself, make a few remarks for 10 minutes or so, following which we will have questions, some of which were submitted previously via the web. But again, I hope all of you have the comment cards that were out at the registration table. If so, by all means, please use them, fill out a question. You can get them to either of these 2 gentlemen over here to my left, your right, or I'll be over here on your left and be able to pick them up, and we'll make sure that they get to the moderator. Also, another use for the comment cards, as I mentioned before, is that if you have any comments that you wish the board to consider, even though you may not have a question, please write the comment on the card, leave it at the registration desk. There's a box there for that purpose, and we will certainly make sure that they come to the attention of the board. So we're going to turn next to our next candidate, Mr. Terry Dade, soon to be Dr. Terry Dade, and our commentator and our moderator for this morning, Casey Jones.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. Glad to see you all here. I hope you do turn in some questions. We got a good amount from before, and I'll be asking those same ones, but keep them coming. So first, we're going to have you introduce yourself, Mr. Terry Dade.
So good afternoon. First and foremost, thank you for taking time out of your family time and beyond to join us for this important forum this afternoon. I am absolutely humbled and honored to even be considered for this absolutely important position for the future of Rochester City Schools. So I am Terry Dade. I would be remiss if I didn't thank the folks who got me to where I am today. So I just wanted to share a little bit about my upbringing. I was born in Washington, D.C. My dad and my grandma raised me in my formative years, so I would not be here without my ma, who, if she's watching, I just want to say thank you. And my dad, who just made sacrifice after sacrifice as a police officer in D.C., raising me at the age of 22. I just don't know how he did it, but I'm absolutely thankful. I am the proud father of Mia and Aiden, who are 8 and 11. They are my pride and joy. They keep me grounded in my work. When I think of the importance of education from my own standpoint, knowing that I wouldn't be here today because if it were not for my own education and my family, but I also hope to do the same for them. As a professional, I started off as a teacher in Virginia, and then I joined the New Leaders for New Schools program, which is based out of New York. Its core mission is to provide high-quality education for all students, regardless of zip code, background, poverty, things of that nature. We are expected to be change agents. So I had the good fortune of serving as a principal in Washington, D.C., then went on to be a principal at my own elementary school, which is an absolutely surreal experience. I got to see the other side of the principal's door rather than be waiting outside in the little chair waiting to meet with the principal. Now, in my current position, I'm the assistant superintendent for Region 3, which is in Fairfax County. Region 3 is a region of 37,000 students, 45 schools. We have approximately a 35% English language learner population. We're 40% Hispanic, 30% white, 20% black, and 10% Asian. And overall, we're approximately 50% free and reduced meals. So I offer that to say, when I think about diversity, that's about as diverse as you can get. When I think about how we provide high-quality instruction and experiences for our schools, I have schools that are highly affluent, all the way to schools that have 98% free and reduced meals. And we look at everything through the same expectation lens of all of our students will achieve at high levels, but our ability to provide resources and support looks a little bit different for those schools. So just a little snapshot of who I am and what makes me tick. The family piece is absolutely important to me. And then I truly believe my purpose is to serve our students and to make sure that they get the education that they deserve, and we as the adults are responsible for making that happen. So again, I'm humbled and honored to be here today, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
All right, let's start off with this. You talked about your family. How do you see your family fitting into this community? Do you plan to be here for the long haul?
Yes, so the work here in Rochester is not going to be something that we can do and accomplish overnight. So I see the experience that we're going to, and the journey that we're going to be on would be at minimum 5 years, but more likely an 8 to 10 year responsibility. And that's responsibility that we have as an adult. I did not apply for this position by happenstance. I did pay a lot of attention to the fact that we've had 5 superintendents in the past 10 years. For me to think that I'm going to come into an environment and contribute to quick turnover would just not be right by our students. So I have been in what we call the DMV, the DC, Maryland, Virginia area since 2007. So I have shown that commitment to be embedded in a community for the long term. I haven't hopped from state to state. I've been in that area for some of my teaching career, but also my administrative career up to my current position. My children, I'm divorced, so my 2 little ones will stay behind in Virginia, but that's something else I've looked at for where I have applied, is to make sure that I can get to see my kids quickly. So I've timed the wheels up to wheels down to be 52 minutes, and that's faster than I can get from my house to DC on a good day. So I'm looking forward to that proximity as well.
All right, so out in the hallway in our little interview, we talked a little bit about data. And one of the points of data that you said concerned you was graduation rate. So specifically, I mean, right now we're sitting at 59%. Great improvement over the last 10 years, 10% improvement over the last 10 years. But in terms of the African-American male population, they continue to lag behind. How do you address that?
So there's no easy answer for this challenge. And there's some things that we can do right away to make sure that we're starting to improve the graduation rate of our students of color, particularly our black males. One, the 9th grade year is an absolutely pivotal year for future success in high school. If you look at our student success in the 9th grade year, particularly our African-American males, and whether they're on track with regards to the courses that they're taking, looking at their absenteeism, are they even in school and engaged in that process at the 9th grade year, is extremely important to think of their success at the end of their high school experience. So paying a lot of attention to particularly 9th grade academies and things of that nature to provide wraparound supports for our students at the 9th grade year. 2, even before we get to the high school experience, there's data points that we have here in the district that are telling us our students will not be successful at the rates that we want at the end of their high school experience. Things like the number of students at the 2nd grade level who are reading on grade level here in the district is below 20%. So if you're not reading on grade level in 2nd grade, the predictor across the nation is 3rd grade reading proficiency is a great indicator of future success. So I would take a deep dive into our African-American male performance there and things of that nature. And then looking at extended learning opportunities over the course of their academic experience, things like summer learning and making sure that we don't have that summer slide each and every year, making sure that there's credit recovery opportunities. So if they missed a course in their 9th grade year, that we have opportunities for them to recover those credits and still be on track to graduate in 4 years. So there's some things that we can do right away to start chomping at those data points to make sure that we're getting the rates that we want for all of our students to graduate on time.
All right. So the majority of our students in the city school district, they're Black and brown students, but our teachers are the opposite. It's that way across the country for the most part. But how would you address teachers who do not see race when they're planning their curriculum? However, they only see children and plan to teach them.
So there's a few things to think through with regards to one, culturally responsive teaching. A lot of it starts with the curriculum. If our curriculum is written in such a way and teachers are planning as such, then we are going to continue to have teaching that does not match the needs of our students. So making sure that the texts that we have in the classroom have characters that look like all of our students. Making sure that we're paying attention to our hiring and retention rates. Do we have any incentives for getting high-quality teachers to serve here in Rochester? Looking at some of our most challenging schools and the turnover rate at some of those most challenging schools and who are filling those positions. So all those do come into place there. The second piece is looking at professional development around our implicit bias. And it's not a white versus black issue. We all have bias. We all have an implicit bias. Our job as the adults is to make sure that that bias does not impact negatively the students that we're serving. So the conversation that is our worst enemy about race is the one that we don't have. So making sure that we're providing opportunities for our staff to engage in those tough conversations to make sure we know who we are as a person, make sure that we unveil our own biases, and make sure that we all know that that's part of us being human, that we do have these biases. Now put the additional lens on what does that mean for our students. Do we give them an opportunity to receive the instruction that they deserve, representative of their background and culture?
Of course. So when it comes to district-wide reform or restoration, which a lot of people would say we need here, a lot of the responsibility falls on the teachers. How would you ensure social and emotional well-being of teachers during this process?
So I've always believed in the power of teachers. My dissertation is around collective efficacy and the importance of everyone in a school building believing that together they can achieve great results for students. So making sure that our students our teachers have the professional development that they need to be successful, the supports and resources from administration and central office to be successful is critically important. The other group asked about absenteeism rates of teachers, and there's always a story to be told. So I would dig a little bit deeper to see why teachers might be absent as frequently as they are, to make sure that we're removing any barriers that are going to impede the progress of our students. So one, it starts with culture. Culture is going to trump any strategy that we employ here as a district. You can have the best laid out plan in a strategic plan or in a school improvement plan, but if the culture is not such that everyone feels mutually accountable for the results, that there's not a culture of fear, what's going to happen if we don't achieve X, Y, or Z, then that's going to impede our progress as well. So really paying attention to the culture in our buildings as well.
Of course. So that Distinguished Educators Report, it was pretty hard on the Board of Education. It called the relationship between the board and the district dysfunctional. How will you work effectively with the Board of Education considering that fact?
So one of my strengths is really how do you get people to work in a manner where we're working all towards one shared vision. So it's not any one group against another. It's really how do I articulate a common purpose and a vision for the group that we're serving, aligned with a plan, and we're all responsible to move forward with that. So in my first position as principal, I was a fairly young principal, and the superintendent at the time asked, how are you going to win over the respect of teachers who have 20 more years of experience than you? And I answered her the same way that I've answered every single position I've had thus far. As soon as it becomes about me, then I need to find another position. It's not about me. It's not about any of the adults in this district. It's about our students. And that's something that I say over and over again with my words, but then I try to back them up with my actions. Integrity is my core leadership belief. I firmly believe that people will not believe the message if they don't believe in the messenger. So again, if I'm stating that we all need to work together for the benefit of our students, and then I go and start making decisions in siloed fashion, then I need to find another position. But that's not the way I operate. It really is, how do you be transparent about the direction and the steps that we need to take? How do we each hold each other mutually accountable for these results? And at the end of the day, have tough and honest conversations to say, what do we need to change and modify because we're not getting the results that we would expect? So all I can say is that's my leadership approach. That's the way I operate. And it would be my constant conversation and collaboration with the board who is going to make some great strides moving forward to make sure that we're getting what we need for our students here in Rochester.
All right. When it comes to the graduation rate, we've talked about it a little bit, but, a lot of district officials are very proud that we're up to 59% now. But if we go a step further, how can we improve the college and career readiness of our students and and make sure they're not just walking across the stage with a piece of paper?
This is probably the crux of everything that I believe in. So that question gets at our students are more than a test score. And when we've engaged in my current environment, colleges and universities, businesses, the military, and asked, what are you looking for in successful employees? They don't expect great test takers. So we do know that these tests can open and close doors, so we're not going to ignore them. I expect continuous improvement, period. And in order for our students to be successful beyond walking across that stage, we need critical thinkers, we need creative processors, we need collaborators, folks who can work with those around them. We need problem solvers who are going to solve problems that we haven't even imagined yet. Those traits can't be captured on a multiple choice standardized test. So we're going to be striving for that balance of when I say college and career ready, it's those skills and attributes that the student's going to need beyond the foundation, the core that we need that measures basic proficiency as deemed by the state of New York. And that collaboration, critical thinking, communication, all those traits are absolutely essential if they're going to be successful beyond their K-12 experience here.
Of course. I'm still trying to figure out how to fit the Pythagorean theorem into my everyday life.
I've never been asked to.
Never. But anyway, how will you, one thing that really disappoints me as a community member is some of our schools, they're very high achievement. They may have a 90% graduation rate. You might go across town to another school, doesn't have nearly that. So how do you kind of capitalize on some of the bright spots of our district to improve it overall?
So one is making sure that our principals, our teachers are visiting each other's schools and really looking at those practices that have been successful. And I've been doing this work long enough that what works in school A may not necessarily work in school B because of they may be in different places on their journey. So the story behind the school A success may be a 10-year journey where they've had a plan in place and moving things along. So when I think of the mobility rate within district here, it's about a 25% mobility rate. So there are going to be certain non-negotiables when we say these are best practices. I would expect to see them in all schools here in Rochester at minimum. We've identified these as critical practices that need to be in place to move all of us forward. Then making sure that we understand the journey that each school is on. So schools in receivership, sending them to a highly successful school with a 90% graduation rate, they may not be ready to tackle all of the strategies that that other school is employing, but what is their first step? What is going to be something that we can put in place now that's going to allow for some accelerated results? So I'm not shy about being in schools. In my current position, my team does 500 plus school visits a year. For me, that's how you really test whether professional development is effective, whether our engagement strategies are effective, and things that matter is really talking with students in the classroom, seeing strategies employed within the classroom, and getting to know the culture behind every building deeply before making decisions moving forward.
So we have a very large Spanish-speaking population here in the Rochester area, and a lot of times that group of students often struggles in school. How would you address that? How do you not only help those students, but even help the parents become more engaged?
So we're really proud of our work with English language learners in my current district. One, we developed standards for English language proficiency. Those aren't necessarily aligned with the standards that New York has established as general education standards. So when we think of listening, speaking, reading, writing, and communicating ability for our Spanish speakers or anyone learning a second language, there's standards that we follow to say what will we expect of newcomers to our district, what we would expect of someone that's been in the district for 2 or 3 years and beyond. The other piece that we're really looking closely at is making sure that in the high school, our second language learners have a scope and sequence of their coursework that allows them to gain credit-bearing courses right away. Some of our English language learners can go 2 years without ever even having a chance to graduate in 4 years. So looking at what courses we're offering at what point in their school year. Translating and having interpretation services at every school event and beyond is critically important, that if we want to engage speakers of other languages in all of our processes, making sure that we have interpreters available to translate within those meetings. And then lastly, when we think of culturally responsive teaching, that becomes much more than a black student, white student conversation. If we're really engaging all of our English language learners and those families, it really is thinking through the lens of all of our students here in Rochester. So having standards for English proficiency is critical, making sure that our course and sequence of coursework is aligned, and then coming up with ways to authentically engage all parents with interpretation, translation, and getting to know cultures more deeply.
All right, so have you ever worked with a great superintendent? And if so, what made him or her great? What traits would you take from them and implement here?
So I've had the good fortune of working for a few superintendents that I've admired different things about them. So my first superintendent in DC, what I admired about her was there was a laser-like focus on student achievement, and high expectations was a non-negotiable. That if you didn't have high expectations for kids, you weren't going to hang around in this district for long. It was an absolute non-negotiable, and there was no complacency in the district, period. From every standpoint, everyone was going to be on board for making our students got what they needed to be successful. In my current district, I got to learn the power of relationships, that it can't be a one-man or one-woman show. It really is, how do you authentically engage all stakeholders to make sure your vision becomes a reality. So relationships is absolutely critical in this work. When we think of authentically engaging parents and community members, our students, our teachers, and our parents, what does that look like when we move initiatives forward. So from them, I've also learned it's our responsibility to be organizational managers. So if we were to put out a particular initiative, what does this mean at the classroom teacher level? What does this mean for our students? Do we really anticipate some of the barriers that might take place as we make decisions for the future of our students?
All right. When it comes to our students, unfortunately, they've seen a lot of things. Some of them. Even last night, I was just covering a shooting. A group of students, kids, I should say, I don't know if they're students, kids walks by and says, "It's just another shooting." Mind you, there's a person laying dead on the ground. So that leads me to believe that a lot of our students have seen a lot. They've been through a lot of trauma. They experience a lot of PTSD. On top of that, we have one of the highest childhood poverty rates in the country. So a lot of these students are coming to school, they haven't even eaten a meal. So how do you address all of those issues and help them learn?
So like I said before, we lead with our kids are more than a test score. We have to remember that. So getting on a student when they walk into your classroom and getting on them about being late right away, or trying to have them sit down and get to work on a do now or whatever in the classroom just may not be taking all things into consideration. When I think of best practice for students in poverty, it really is thinking of the whole child. So the importance of the socio-emotional piece being equally as important as the academic piece. So getting at some of the things that you're talking about, having breakfast in the classroom is something that our district has moved towards, to say we're going to provide some schools with 100% breakfast in their classroom each and every day to make sure that they're fed when they walk through our doors. Making sure our teachers and administrators receive trauma-informed practices and professional development in each of our buildings to understand poverty and chronic stress and what that means for a child. And at the end of the day, we are still responsible for making sure no matter what's going on, that we're setting up our students for success at the end of their time with us here in Rochester. So there is a point where we have hard conversations, and I've had them as a teacher and administrator say, I know things are tough outside of these doors. When you walk through these doors, we're going to provide you with all of the supports necessary to make sure you're successful because we believe in you, that education is the pathway for you to do whatever you want when you walk across that stage. So making sure that we also have that reality check to say, we understand that this could be challenges and barriers, and it's our responsibility as the adults leading this district to provide the supports and resources necessary to combat and mitigate the impact of poverty on a child's education.
So some of our students, they get up to the high school level, and then the teachers up there, they realize these kids are illiterate. They can't read, they can't write. So what is your strategy for helping children become independent readers, writers, speakers, and thinkers by 4th grade?
So this is one of the areas I've identified as an area that we would have to spend a lot of time and attention to here in the district. I alluded to the 2nd grade reading proficiency. Nationwide research says that 3rd grade reading proficiency is a great predictor of future success. So one is looking at making sure that we have a balanced literacy approach for our students that really looks at authentic reading experiences, making sure that the texts that they're putting their hands on are actually relevant to their experience, making sure that we do have explicit instruction around some of the foundational areas of phonics and word development, comprehension, fluency, all of those pieces that are going to make a good reader a good reader. Making sure that we value the importance of writing. Good writers are typically very good readers as well. So making sure that we have Writers' Workshop and Readers' Workshop in existence in our schools. And then also making sure that we have teachers that have the skill set to provide differentiated and individualized instruction for those students to accelerate their progress. So if a student by 2nd grade is reading 1 grade level below, we have to have a different plan in place if they're going to be successful by the 3rd grade year. So what does that look like with regards to any interventions in place there. But I would make it a metric that we would pay a lot of attention to here in the district, make sure that we provide professional development and resources for our teachers. So I would ask, do we have any guarantees of professional development here in the district? If early literacy is not a guarantee, then we would need to quickly move in that direction. Otherwise, we're leaving that as a chance experience for our students.
All right, what is your perspective on the role and the future of charter schools, both in your prior district as well as here in Rochester?
So I had a bit of experience with charter schools in DC. So I was the principal of a public school. In a 1 mile radius, I had 5 charters that my families could easily walk to. At the time, I was responsible for the students I was serving at my elementary school. So it did become a bit of a competition, but it was a healthy competition. The competition was, how do we provide the high quality instruction, the environment, and the programming that our parents are asking for? So when I came in as principal over the summer, I engaged parents in what they're looking for in their child's schooling experience, and there were some gaps that we needed to put in place. So we became an arts integration school, and we solidified our efforts of being a Spanish immersion school. And then we ended up with a wait list of over 500 families. So it's not a public school versus charter school. I would be looking at the portfolio of school offerings that we offer here in the district, because when I looked at the charter schools that are in the city, it's things like STEAM and leadership and things of that nature that may be missing in some of our schools, so making sure that we offer those experience there. But then also making sure that our achievement results are showing the right trajectory, that we get our mobility rate within district down. So it's not even necessarily a charter versus Rochester City issue. Even within our school system, students and families moving from one school to another is at 25%. So there's some things that we need to look at within us before we even have a conversation about us versus them in the charter discussion.
Interesting. This question comes from a student. How would you deal with racism in schools?
So to deal with racism in schools is one, making sure that we have the conversation. Racism is a real issue in our schools. There's systemic racism, institutionalized racism, the bias that we all have in this room. We all carry bias with us about a group or other. So having that conversation as the adults to make sure we all understand the lens that we bring to the story. My lens is a lens of moving from poverty to living in poverty in a middle class environment. So I knew my lens was not necessarily the same experience that my students in DC and my current region were experiencing. But me realizing that made that something that I could use to impact the way I was instructing my students and leading my students. I also think that there's folks around the country who are doing great work when it comes to providing professional and leadership development in the areas of equity and bias and racism. So making sure that we partner with other organizations to come in and help us with these very tough conversations. I also think we need to have conversations as our students about this as well. So how do we make sure that we're providing opportunities for our students to discuss racism and their biases and things of that nature, while our teachers and our leaders are engaging in those conversations as well. It's a very powerful experience when everyone's talking the same language of what does it mean when you're looking at something through your reality versus the reality of someone that you're speaking with. So the conversation is one way that we start, professional development is the other. And then we need to have accountability measures, period. We need to say at some point, there's things that are unacceptable that we will not allow, and these are the consequences if they are in place. So there's that piece as well. I like to come from the strength area of let's educate, and there's certain practices and behaviors that will just be not tolerated in our school system.
So if you are chosen, what would your first 90 days look like on the job?
So the first 90 days would really look at hitting the ground, listening. There's a lot of data out there. This district is not shy with putting things in the paper and online, so there's a lot of data already out there. But I would want to hear directly from students and parents and business organizations, faith-based organizations, our leaders in the schools, our teachers, all the stakeholders that we can get in over the summer to really listen to the why behind some of the data, because this district is more than just numbers. So how did we get here? What are some of the strengths of the district that we need to put on a pedestal and replicate these practices across the district? What are some barriers to our success? And how can you partner with me to move Rochester forward? So a lot of listening. And as I shared my new leaders experience, I'm not one to sit back for a year and just hope that things will change. So there's going to be some listening, and I believe you're hiring the next leader to effect change pretty quickly. So I do have some ideas of what some of those pieces might be. So engaging in a strategic planning process is critical. I'm not afraid of accountability, and we all need to be singing from the same sheet of music with regards to here's our goals, here's how we're going to get there, and then hold me accountable for that roadmap. 2, the culture is something I bring as a strength. When I say culture, it's that culture of we all have high expectations for our students, period. If not, we're going to have very tough conversations. 2, we as the adults are responsible for making that vision a reality, period. If it starts to become about the adults, we're going to have very tough conversations. It needs to be about our students and their success. So that culture will be felt here because it's just at my core that together we can make great things happen. And then 3, instructional leadership is my wheelhouse. So when I talk about being able to observe, assess, and provide feedback on high-quality instruction, that's what I'm known for. So we came up with an a school improvement model for the whole district that I'm in currently. My superintendent tasked me with developing that system, and one of those pieces was the partnership of central office to school teachers and principals to say, here are some strengths within the school, here are some areas that we need to grow, and then how are we quickly going to put supports in place to make sure that we're getting there. So the visibility in schools and classrooms is going to be another very quick noticing here in Rochester under my leadership.
Talk to us a little bit about some of the, things that you're proud of that you've accomplished since you've been assistant superintendent out in Fairfax County.
So our greatest accomplishment, 45 schools, very diverse needs in my region, and we had 13 schools that were deemed by the state as accredited with warning, meaning they were not achieving the minimum benchmarks set by the Commonwealth of Virginia. We currently have 1. So in 3 years under my leadership, we reduced it from 13 to 1. I'm extremely proud of that. Most proud of how we did it. It wasn't a decree from Terry saying all schools will do X, Y, or Z. We sincerely partnered with our schools because they were all in different steps of their journey. A one-size-fits-all does not work for school and district reform. It does not work. You have to know the story behind what's impeding student progress. You have to, as the adults responsible for our student success, be mutually accountable with that principal, with that teacher. It's not a us versus them. You can't blame the teachers without accepting responsibility as senior leadership to say, what am I missing? What didn't I provide our teaching staff with so they can be successful for our students? So the how we made it happen is what I'm most proud of, and that we aren't growing schools beyond that. So once they're out, we keep them out of accreditation concerns.
On the flip side, what are some mistakes that you believe that you've made since you've been in that position?
So what I would do differently if I could do my journey all over again is we were under very distinct pressure from the state of what do you do with schools who are experiencing long-lasting concerns with achievement results. And in the Commonwealth, one of those pieces is change in leadership and change in teaching staff. I firmly don't believe that that is the recipe for school improvement. There have been instances in some schools where we needed a leadership change. There have been instances in some schools where we needed teaching staff in different spots. But wholesale removing a principal and half of a teaching staff, there's not many stories, or if you know of them, there's not many stories where the next year or the next 2 years that school is able to turn it around. So I come from the standpoint of providing the supports and resources and the professional and leadership development necessary to move student success forward. So I would do that a bit differently. Some of that was within my control and some of it was without. But culture for me is critical. In my first year entering the region and then 3 of our principals being removed was a tough start for me in my region. To say we're going to work together as a Region 3 family and then have that happen was a very tough start for me.
Of course. So this is a question from the audience. The district is highly unionized. How will you engage the union and address their wins and challenges?
So in DC, we were highly unionized. We're in the paper all the time, on the news for our teachers union in DC. And really the recipe for my success as a principal and what I would hope for here in Rochester is if we truly believe that we as all adults are responsible for our students' success, then we're going to work together as such. We have to model for our students what we expect them to be doing as students in our district. So what that means is making sure that we start with the end in mind. This is what we want for all students here in Rochester. How are we going to get there? Does our budget, does our professional development, does our contract and everything align with those beliefs and mission and values of Rochester City Schools? If it's not, then we have to have open and honest conversations with one another behind closed doors. We discuss challenges and opportunities to move forward, and I can't express how important this last piece is, both as a board family and with our unions, that we walk out with one voice, that we believe that the decisions that we've made today are going to impact positively every single child, every single teacher here in Rochester. So again, if it becomes about me as the adult, I need to move on. It's never been about me. It's been about us as a collective working together to make sure that we're providing everyone who has the benefit of working with our students each and every day what they need to be successful.
All right. So how will you address students that are not successful in a traditional school setting?
So this is a tricky question. This gets at alternative schools and things of that nature. So I would really be looking at our whole program here. So thinking of what's in place with regards to alternative schools and making sure that we're holding true to the intent and purpose of those programs. Making sure that a decision made today doesn't impact a student for life. So if we're moving a student to an alternative setting, is it in the belief that we believe with some additional supports that are going to be provided in this setting, they're going to be successful in the long term? If we can't say yes to that, then we need to go back to the drawing board to make sure that the decision we make today does not impact the student's future as a citizen and adult. So we currently have alternative schools in my district for special education purposes. So there's a clinical school that just has high need for intense psychology, social work, that clinical experience for those students to be successful. We have another school where through our disciplinary process, rather than keeping them outside of school in our district, they're in an alternative setting for providing the supports socio-emotionally that they need. Our mission for that type of environment is that they're not in that environment for life. So we can't have a sixth grader enter into an alternative setting and just throw our hands up and say this is their experience for the next 6 years. We should have a plan in place to get that student and family the supports that they need so they can jump right back into a general education setting as soon as we see the progress made. So I believe in a continuum of services and support. I do believe alternative settings has a role in that, and there's improvements that we can make probably here in Rochester and in my own district of what are the decision-making processes that get a student there? Is it just incident happens and they're placed? Or have we really looked at what supports has this child received over the past 4 years? What supports will the child get in this setting that's going to set them up for future success? So long-winded answer to say that is a tricky question, but I would have to learn a little bit more about the alternative setting here in Rochester.
Well, preparing to become a candidate, what were some of the strategies you used to get to know the parents, students, community partners, and teachers of the city school district?
So I Googled you all a lot. To prepare for this position, one, I looked at some of the history behind some of the superintendents and what they did well or not so well, because I do believe in learning some of the strengths from previous leaders and then things I just want to not replicate as a leader. I've watched news clips and school board meetings and things of that nature to get a flavor for how we make decisions here in Rochester. So once I see a news story, I'll try to do some digging in the website as well. Looked at this Distinguished Educator Report, the follow-up to the Educator Report and things of that nature to look for what are some pieces I see could go into a 5-year plan and how do you backwards map to make sure that we're meeting all the expectations and doing what's right by our kids. So when I saw the report, it hit me hard to say I would not want to be the leader who comes in to just follow a report, but really get to know the community and in our schools and our students and families in such a way that we can see where we need to make certain decisions moving forward. And then I visited the area a few times. Someone special to me is from Western New York. She corrected me quickly to say, you can't just say New York. There's different parts of New York. So there's the city, there's upstate, there's Western. So I got educated quickly on the differences between the geographic regions. So I got well-versed in the difference between Tim Hortons and my Starbucks. You're going to have to give up Starbucks if you come here. Wegmans and Perry's ice cream. So just the fun part of knowing a community and the differences between kind of where I'm from and beyond. So got to Google a lot, got to read a lot, and then I've actually spent some time in Western New York to get to know the culture a little bit better.
School safety is a big topic now, of course, with everything going on in the country and the world. What are your thoughts on making a better safety and security department for not only the staff, but also students and parents too? The whole community, really.
So that's our number one priority, is making sure our students are safe each and every day. So that's something that I wouldn't take lightly. It would be something I would look at immediately just to make sure that we're doing everything necessary to keep our schools safe and secure. I don't know what exists here with regards to security staffing and things of that nature, so it would be premature for me to say anything of that nature, but a few things I do believe in is perfect practice makes perfect. So practicing drills and things of that nature in our schools seriously would be a non-negotiable. That it's not something that we just do because it's critical to our students' safety. Two, looking at best practices across the nation. We've dealt with a lot of tragedy across the nation, and school districts have taken different measures to make sure that we're enhancing our security and safety protocols. So I would take a look at what's going on across the nation to make sure that we have the best practices in place here. And then lastly, making sure that we adequately fund whatever we say we need for safety and security. So as a collective family, if we believe that something needs to move forward quickly to make sure our students and families are safe and secure, then we need to make sure that we have those conversations early and be proactive and put those measures in place before we experience an unfortunate incident.
When it comes to some of our programs and services that you've had a chance to look over, what are some of the things, just off the top of your head, that you could think that we should probably keep around and things that we probably should consider getting rid of?
So some of the programs and services, when I was saying in the charter discussion, I have been impressed with the portfolio of schools here in Rochester. For a district this size to have the offerings that it has, that's something to keep and enhance. Things like the arts and STEM and immersion, things of that nature, to make sure our parents are getting what they feel their students need. So that's something to celebrate. Our pre-K experience and making sure we have those early learning opportunities for our youngest babies is absolutely critical. So those are pieces that I would keep at the forefront. Moving forward, I think there's some things that we need to kind of streamline just to make sure that we can digest and move a plan forward. It's really, really difficult as an educator to have 50 plates spinning and try to do all 50 of those things well. So can we have some tough and honest conversations about if we do these 5 to 10 things really, really well, we believe that they will lead to accelerated results in the district. So I am concerned about the existing reality of the Distinguished Educator Report coupled with receivership schools. There's a lot of data and messaging that's out there on what we should be doing to move forward. And I would like to take all that and really condense it and try to figure out what are our next top 3 to 10 action items that will definitely lead to success in our school district.
All right. When it comes to our district, we have a perpetual problem with attendance. What would you do to make students want to come to school and address some of the barriers that might be keeping them from school?
So one of the things that we should probably take a really close look at, and you all are leading the nation when I think of the number of schools that you have in kind of a community schools model, to have as many as you do in a smaller district shows that you're focused on the right work. But there's reasons behind absences that go beyond the classroom. So there's things like the health and well-being of our students, engaging parents in the education process as early as possible that we've seen kind of in the Harlem Children's Zone and beyond that is already in place here, but we could probably expand those efforts here that would get at some of the other side of absenteeism. Then there's things that are happening in the classroom and in schools that are leading to absences. So are we engaging our students in such a manner that we're capitalizing on their passions? So infusing play and arts and STEM and technology into our daily instruction that might be something that a student is passionate about and will want to come to school each and every day, rather than finding excuses to be absent. That would be one of my top 3 areas to pay attention to here in Rochester. When you look at graduation rate, the percentage of students who are chronically absent sits at 40%. That's a big deal, big deal. So that's 40% of our students here in Rochester come to school less than 90% of the time. And if we dug deeper, it would probably be a little bit more disconcerting when you look at those percentages of exactly how often are they coming to school. So looking at restorative justice, because some of that is discipline related, looking at the socio-emotional piece, and then making sure our instruction is rigorous, but also tailored to meet the needs and passions of our students. So it's not an easy answer, but I can say that would be a top priority for whoever comes in next as the superintendent of Rochester.
All right. What would you do to give struggling students a purpose for staying in school?
So one is just sharing my own story and the stories of others that I've had the great fortune of working with. Two is having that belief and making sure that we all as the adults working together have that belief, that unwavering belief that we believe in you, we know you can do it, and we're going to do whatever it takes to make sure you are successful. So the expectations that we have as adults, and not saying, oh, at least it's not 40% anymore. How do we really raise those expectations across the district? And then three, kind of those wraparound services pieces of sometimes we point just to teachers and what's going on in the classroom without taking the whole picture in mind of what's accounting for a student struggling so much. A great story that I bring up in my own district is at the 6th grade, at the elementary to middle school transition it's a critical time period for us where we see our struggling students' numbers explode. And when you do some digging, there's some reasons behind that. In a typical elementary school experience, they're all taking core content. They have PE, music, things of that nature. When they go to middle school and high school, they start to have what we call remediation classes. So let's take little Terry, who's passionate about the arts. And I love taking art class all throughout elementary school. But I'm struggling in reading and math. And then I get placed in double blocks of math and reading in middle school and can't take electives as a kiddo. Am I going to want to, I'm struggling already in reading and math, and you're going to have me sit all day in reading and math courses, and I'm giving up art or band or something of that nature at that expense. Like, how do we provide the supports that's not going to be at the detriment of something that a student is passionate about? So that's an example of engaging a struggling student. They may just not like their school experience, so what can we do to impact that experience for him or her to be successful?
Makes sense. Please share your thoughts and experience about the importance of integration/desegregation to break down the negative effects of concentrated poverty.
So this is tough because the numbers hold true. Concentrated poverty and the impact on a child's education is real. It's real all across the country. And the way we go about addressing that is very, very complicated. So one, I believe in neighborhood schools. I truly believe in neighborhood schools. I believe if I buy a home or I rent an apartment in this neighborhood, I should have the confidence to send my kids to X, Y, or Z school. I just believe in it. I believe it's our responsibility to make that happen. The reality is, if you're in a particular neighborhood and it's 98% in poverty, your options for programming and things of that nature may be different from someone in a more affluent population. So I don't believe in moving kids around just to solve a problem that I believe that we can solve with some concerted efforts as a district. So I think an easy answer is let's shift everyone around, let's make the numbers work out. That's an easy answer. It's not easy to make happen, but that's an easy answer to say, if we only did this, this would solve our problems. I do believe the needs of each community is different, and we need to provide the resources and supports necessary in that community to make sure that the students who elected to live in that neighborhood are getting the education experience that they deserve. So, complicated answer, but I do believe it's on us to figure out how to make neighborhood schools.
Of course, complicated issue, complicated answer, all that. So you said that you watched some of the school board meetings, so you probably know that sometimes there's disruptions, to say that nicely, in those board meetings. One person in the audience asked, have you ever had to face an angry crowd, and how did you handle it?
Yes, so it's not something that's fun, and I believe that there's a reason behind every action. One of my most unpopular angry crowd experiences was changing a school boundary, saying school A and your families, you're now going to school B. That's not a fun meeting to have, and as you can imagine, there's some emotion behind those types of meetings. So what we try to do is make sure that we are being proactive. So rather than just showing up at a meeting and saying, guess what, we're going to move students and families around, a year out saying, this is what we see happening a year from now, and this is why. Your school is overcrowded. There's a school that just opened that is bright, beautiful, newly renovated, and we have a capacity issue here. That's the problem that we're trying to solve. The options that we have are X, Y, and Z. X is not status quo, so let's have that honest conversation right now, a year out, that as is not going to happen. So we really need to think deeply about these other two options of how we can move forward, get feedback on the pros and cons of everything, and then at the end of the day, how the decision is going to be made moving forward. And then communicating that all along the way. We put FAQs on our website to say, this is every single question that parents had to ask. These are all of our answers, so it's not Miss Jones picked up the phone and called me because I know Miss Jones. It's no, Miss Jones asked this question, and here's the answer. So everyone has the same information. Something I'm known for is you will never get me to rise to your level of anger or frustration. It doesn't help anyone in the process. It doesn't look good when I tell all of my students and all the people I work with that it's my responsibility to model the actions that I would expect of anyone around me. You will never find an instance where someone's angry at me and I rise to that level. I'm clear and consistent with, I can hear your frustration. There is a certain level of respect that we're going to have for this conversation to continue. So we may not be able to have this conversation productively right now, so that we can both move forward and both be heard, so we can make a decision that's going to do right by your student at the end of the day. So I have had those situations, and I'm pretty good at bringing everyone to a decorum of mutual respect, so that we can all act on behalf of our students.
All right. How do you see yourself interacting with our students?
So this is something I absolutely love. Like I said, in my other session, I teach Zumba, so I love music and dance, and I typically get asked to come to student pep rallies and staff warming events, things of that nature, because I just love, that's what gives me energy. When I say I'm out, me and my team are out in schools no less than 500 times a year, we take that seriously. One, it helps us get a pulse for what our students are experiencing. We get to ask them directly. The most honest people in the district are our students with regards to what's working well and what's not. So I get to hear right from them how engaging their experience is. And then we get to just have fun. There's nothing more energizing than seeing our amazing students in action, whether it's on the sports field, on stage, in the classroom, or beyond. So they will see me, they'll follow me on Twitter and other places, but it's what I enjoy most about this work.
All right. What are your thoughts about including RCSD leaders, many of whom have a track record of success in your efforts to improve the city school district?
So this is where hitting the ground listening is critically important. There's fantastic things going on in the district, and my approach is not from a deficit model. There's things that we need to address as a community, and there's time after time, I just spoke with the principal here and other places of where we see successes across the district and how do we replicate those practices and environments across. So engaging those stakeholders with regards to what's working well, what led to their success, what advice they have for me in moving things forward would be absolutely critical. Rather than just focusing on the negative, we have to celebrate what's working well. Good news stories. People aren't going to just jump up and give us great press, so making sure that we celebrate the great things going on in our schools is nothing better than highlighting a teacher or a student each and every week. Teacher Tuesdays is something that we could bring right away of let's find the most phenomenal teachers in the system and celebrate them every Tuesday. That's something that's easy to do because we have them all over the place here in Rochester. Same thing with our students. We have amazing students here that needs to be celebrated, and it's energizing to see other folks who are right there beside you having a very successful journey here.
This question a little bit. It's somebody from the audience, but Rochester has a rich heritage and history when it comes to civil rights and the quest for social justice. How do you use that to motivate students and bring a stronger sense of community?
So this is where you put your money where your mouth is if you're going to be have culturally responsive instruction and curriculum. So to know the history of Rochester while you're in a Rochester school should be a non-negotiable. So no matter what the textbook says, no matter what the curriculum says, there's ways that you can modify lesson plans to make sure that our students understand the rich history of why they should be proud of where they are, and to make sure that we respect and admire and honor those who came before us, because there was a lot of hard work put into getting us to where we are today. So making sure that we don't just wait for Black History Month or some other hallmark event to make sure that we're acknowledging everything in our rich history here in Rochester.
Of course, the city of Frederick Douglass and Susan B. Anthony. We got to know more than that, though. There's plenty of them. So how do you balance your vision of our district with the particular wants of individual school board members or school leaders, and what has been your experience with this?
So this is just where actions are going to speak louder than words. And when I say our vision, in every role that I've had, it's been our vision. It can't be Terry's vision. It can't be school board's vision. It can't be teachers' vision. It can't be principal's vision. It can't be parents-only vision. It's all of us collectively engaging with one another to figure out where do we want to be in 5 years. Our vision is this. And this is the roadmap that we're going to use to get there. So there's no other way to say it than I will not have a banner in my office that says I will be a collaborative leader who leads with mutual trust and respect. I expect to say that, and then for you to hold me accountable with my actions. So every opportunity that I have, it's not, no, Mr. Dade, not what Mr. Dade's vision is. Our vision as a Rochester family is this. And this is how we're going to get there. Here's my role in achieving and accomplishing that vision. I would love to discuss how we can partner together to achieve that vision, but our vision is this. It's on paper, it's communicated out as consistently as possible, and then measuring our progress towards accomplishing that vision is going to be critical for our success.
Are you going to be able to deal with this cold weather here?
I am. I was remarking to someone, I was with my daughter at a gymnastics competition in Virginia Beach yesterday morning, and by the time I landed, it was 20 degrees cooler. So I'm used to it. Getting to know Western New York, I know that it's not for the faint of heart when it comes to cold weather. I know you don't close schools as frequently as we do in my current district with regards to snow closures and things of that nature, but it's the people that I would be coming to Rochester for, not the weather, not a particular store or anything. I'm coming here for the people of Rochester, making sure that we provide our students with a high-quality education, no matter what neighborhood, zip code, or background or challenges they've experienced.
All right, thank you, Mr. Dade.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you again, Terry, and particularly Casey. It was a great conversation. This is not going to be the end of the day for the candidates, incidentally. They are now going to be interviewed in 2 sessions by the Board of Education. For the purposes of transparency, both of those interviews are going to be recorded, and they will be broadcast on Monday. So with that, thank you all for your interest in education and taking your afternoon to be with us.